All right, we're just at 8 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everyone who has signed in to date to our Hyatt-hosted workshop, Personal Branding to Get You Noticed and Hired in the Digital Age. It is my pleasure to welcome you tonight. My name is Andrea Dine. I'm the Associate Director of the Hyatt Career Center, and will be acting as your question moderator for the evening and also be here should you need technical support. That being said, please feel free to use the question box on your computer, and I will work to answer your questions very specifically, either by replying in the answer box or directing questions specifically to Aaron online as he's presenting. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead, Aaron, and turn the conversation over to you, our presenter for Personal Branding to Get You Noticed and Hired in the Digital Age. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you, everyone, for RSVPing and being here, taking the evening to spend with Hyatt and with me as well. Just before we begin, I wanted to give a little bit of background about myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Aaron Finegold. I graduated from Brandeis in 2009 with a degree in English and American literature, as well as psychology, and minors in Spanish and economics. Since graduating, I've been working at OgilvyOne, which is the kind of one-to-one arm of Ogilvy and Mather, the ad agency. I've been in New York, working across multiple categories, but focusing pretty much specifically on IBM in the B2B technology space, as well as doing some work with Ogilvy Culture, which we'll get into in a little bit later, which is very consumer-facing. It looks at kind of changing the model for how marketers and agencies work together to target the increasingly complex demographics of the United States. The presentation, as Andrea noted, is called Personal Branding to Get You Noticed and Hired in the Digital Age. And so this was originally crafted for college students. I went up to Brandeis in September and spent a day with Hyatt doing office hours and then 2 seminars, this being one of them. And we're going to talk today about getting noticed, right? So whether that's by recruiters, right, by other alumni, by anybody in a field who may be of interest to you, and as well about getting hired. And while particularly relevant for college students, especially seniors, you as an alumni network may be wondering why getting hired is relevant if you are very happy in your current job. Why would this be something worthwhile? And what I'd like to do now, Andrea, if you don't mind, is go to the first poll, which is the what we're calling the negotiation poll. And what I'm asking here is an opinion, right, or a kind of assessment of which of the 3 scenarios is most likely to lend itself to negotiation. And there are multiple different ways to be considered for a job, and just wanted to know which one you think lends itself most to the highest degree of leverage a candidate would have.
All right, Aaron, the votes are coming in right now. We have about 47% of attendees having voted. It's a quick battle between the latter 2 choices, the candidate was referred internally through networking and the candidate was sought out by the HR team.
Okay.
We're up to 78%. We'll give that another second, and then I'll go ahead and share that poll.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
All right, we're up to about 88%, so I'm going to go ahead and close and share that poll.
Perfect. Thank you.
So the poll results were 0% said posted on the company career website. There's a great optimism for the web. 65% responded the candidate was referred internally, and 35% responded the candidate was sought out by the HR recruiting team.
Great. So thanks everybody who voted. And actually, I will tell you that in my experience, and of course this is a poll, right, so it's opinion and there's no real right answer, but in my experience and in the experience that I've observed of others around me, Actually, when a candidate is recruited proactively by a member of the HR team at a given organization, that actually usually tends to lend itself to the highest degree of leverage that that candidate has, because when the candidate is referred internally, the power situation reads such that it appears that the candidate is looking for a job and using his or her internal contact as a lever to get that job. On the contrary, when a candidate is contacted proactively by a member of the HR team, really the candidate is the one in power. And it looks as if the HR team, right, or the recruiting team is asking the candidate to come join this organization. And so given that as a premise, right, we're going to use that to kind of set the stage for this entire presentation. Now, it's not wrong, right, to say that there's a great deal of leverage when a candidate is referred internally. In fact, there is. And getting noticed and getting hired doesn't take place only by recruiting professionals, right? If you want to network with alumni, it's certainly beneficial to have that alum notice you before you reach out to that alum. Alumni in various fields get dozens of requests per week with people inquiring about everything from advice to actual jobs. If you can get that alum to notice you beforehand, right, or simultaneously when you ask for help, that is extremely beneficial. And hopefully some of the pointers in today's presentation will make that process easier for you. So that's why this is relevant to experienced professionals as well as it was to college juniors and seniors when I presented it in September. So today we're going to go over organic search, right? So when somebody searches your name in Google, what are the results that come up? What results do you want to show up? What do you want to diminish, right? Or what do you want to de-emphasize? And how can you make the organic search behavior, which is all so ubiquitous, work for you? We learn about social media, what employers are doing on social media, how they use it in the hiring process, how an alum might look for you, and what you'd really want them to see. Web presence as well, right? Having a personal website, a portfolio, a blog, etc., and then also email, right? And kind of what are the tips. The whole kind of basis or theme for this presentation is around brand management, personal brand management in the digital age. So you'll notice that each of these four categories deals with the digital medium, whether it's computer, tablet, smartphone, whatever it may be. And we'll talk about that specifically when we get into email. But it's important to keep in mind that as the world progresses, right, digitally across countries, so will the methods that organizations employ to recruit talent. So when we talk about organic search, really people, whether they're recruiters, whether they're alums, no matter who they are, use organic search, Google, Yahoo, and or Bing on a regular basis, right? Whether they're looking up a cough syrup, whether they want to know what the stock market did in the day, or whether they want to know something about you. It's easy, it's accessible, it's on every smartphone, and it's just kind of an intrinsic behavior. So we want to be able to do two things here. We want to, one, be able to increase rank, meaning we want content that's about us and content that reflects positively on us to float up to the top of the Google search results or the Yahoo Bing search results. And we also want to get rid of unwanted content. We don't want any content that portrays us in a negative light to show up, ideally at all in organic search, and most certainly on the first page. When we talk about social media, we'll be looking at LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, all three of which are very prolific. Of course, I'm the first to acknowledge that there are many other social sites. These three are probably the first line of defense, though, for most recruiters and most alums who are looking to learn something about you. We'll talk about managing profiles, what information you want to share, what you don't want to share, participating in conversation, and how the goal of social networks, the goal of social media inherently is to facilitate conversation, right? To build community. That's what makes it social. That's all. I mean, conversation and social are almost synonymous. I mean, one is an adjective, one's a noun. But regardless, the point is, if you're not participating in conversation, you're not taking advantage of all that social media has to offer, but there is a right way and a less than ideal way to go about doing that. And then ultimately, professionalism guidelines for both. This is kind of like a lens on top of both of these. What you want to do, what you want to avoid. Because, as I'm sure you've heard and know, this is also, just like organic search, a very easy way for an employer to learn about you. When we talk about web presence, we'll talk both about websites themselves, right, like an actual website, and then also blogs. And we'll talk about how they may or may not show up in organic search, and then once they do, knowing that that content is owned and controlled by you, the reader might have a higher degree of scrutiny applied to the reading of those individual properties. And then we'll talk about email, right? We'll talk about how email takes place now across multiple platforms, whether that's mobile, desktop, laptop, and or tablet, and what that means, and what some of the guidelines are that you can use to make sure your email communications work for you, right, as opposed to against you. So we'll go through the first section about organic search, and then we'll pause for any questions. This gets relatively technical. I just want to kind of point out at the beginning here that not every section is going to have the same level of detail, and that's intentional, right? Some of the slides here are more how-to, some of them are more guidance, and the reason for that is I just wanted to bring the most valuable information up to the top, and we also have the time constraints. So hopefully this will give you a good look into some of the more granular aspects of personal brand management while giving you guidance on others. So the first aspect that we're going to dive deep into is really how to increase that organic search ranking. And the first piece of advice that I will say, which is easier said than done, is to get ink, right? To get press about you. And so when I was a senior, I did a fundraiser at Brandeis in early February of 2009, and I made sure that it got some coverage in the Boston Globe's online edition, which is boston.com. This will show up in every organic search conducted against my name, and it's great to share. And because it's from the Boston Globe and not just the Brandeis press sites, it has increased credibility. Here's another example, and the reason I want to point this out is this example that I show here, the gala at Brandeis to benefit homeless adults, was something that I proactively did and then later on got press around. The Ogilvy Culture Initiative or practice was something that I attached myself to early on because I knew it had press potential. So this is really relevant to experienced professionals like most of you, and was probably just generally good advice for the college students I was talking to in September. Attach yourselves at organizations you work at to the initiatives that you think are going to be most press-worthy, right? So get involved in things where you think you'll get more mileage, right, out of being involved. I mean, don't do something that you're not interested in. Don't do something that you're doing just to get press. But if it's something you're passionate about, or something you're interested in, devoting the time to that can be highly beneficial. And this is Stuart Elliott's advertising column in the New York Times. It was on the front page of Business Day. And, you know, now, going back to it, that's a huge name, right, New York Times, to have on my resume. And so by attaching yourself to the initiatives, right, or the endeavors in your organization that you think are most likely to receive coverage can be greatly beneficial. And it doesn't always work out, but it's the kind of thing that will ultimately help your organic search rankings significantly if you can get any kind of public attention for something that you're involved with. Also, something that's helpful for increasing organic rank is using one name. right? So using Aaron Mitchell Finegold, which I've done, helps. If I put that on my resume, that's likely what the recruiter will type into Google. Even if the recruiter knows that Mitchell is my middle name, it's what he or she sees on paper. And so that's probably the easiest way to go about searching for me. And number 3 here really is be active on social media. You'll see that these two social media links actually happen to rise to the top of organic search. And what's really interesting here is that all they see, they don't really see very much in the search results, right? There's not a lot of text that accompanies each link. But everything that does appear here is something that I would want to be known, right? And it kind of, and this is taken from a while ago, right, when I was still an analyst before I became a consultant. But the point of it really is that if you have social media profiles filled out the way they should be filled out, and we'll discuss that in the next section, a recruiter doing even a quick scan without clicking on any links can still learn a lot about you. And very often, they don't click on all the links. They just do a quick scan to see what comes up. Now we move, so that was the increasing rank part of our organic search discussion. The next section is unwanted content. And here's where we get a bit technical. So if you own the page, if you were the one who developed, right, and coded the page that has the unwanted content, it's pretty simple. You have to remove the content. So don't just remove the link from Google, right? You actually have to remove the content. So whether that's a PDF, right, or something that's actually in code, or an image, go ahead and remove the link and remove the content. And we'll talk about removing the link in a second. If you don't, then contact the owner and ask for removal. And I would say probably 8 times out of 10, if you have some kind of relationship with the owner, and if you just make the case that you know, for your own professional standards, wouldn't like to have that content included, and the owner still has access to that page, he or she will likely remove it for you. Either way, it's very important to use the URL removal tool, right, which is when we say removing the link, because that's the way that Google can help accelerate the process for you. So very simply, you can go into Google and you can tell them that you have a Google request, and they'll ask you what product does it relate to. And obviously they have a lot of products. They probably have more. They put their app marketplace. They put, in addition to the Android market, they put a lot more here now with all their increasing acquisitions. But all you have to click is web search, right? And then when you say specify the nature of your request, all you have to say is that a piece of content you're concerned about has been removed by the webmaster, whether that's you or somebody you know. And it's still appearing among search results. So again, this will help accelerate the process. And then they will tell you what the text on the bottom says is that their spiders crawl the web to rebuild the index. If you alert them to the fact that you want a specific URL removed, then that will help them know where to target their spiders. And so what you do is you would click New Removal Request, right? So that's blown up right here. Enter the URL that you'd like to remove. So this is literally, if it's an image, it's the URL of the image, not the URL of the page on which the image appears. It's very important. They're very different things. And then click Continue. Oh, sorry. And then Google will say your request has been processed, and they're in the process of, you know, alerting the spiders that next time they call the page, given that that content has been removed, they should remove it from organic search as well. I've had to deal with this at least twice that I can remember, and to be honest, it was a fairly simple process both times. Not everyone will have that experience, but all I did is I contacted the person who owned the page. I said, I don't want the content that you have to be associated with my name, so if you could please remove it. They removed it. I alerted Google. I checked back a few days later, and it was gone from the organic search rankings. So it's a very, very useful tool to have. And so before we move on, sorry, I'm clicking unnecessarily. Before we move on to the social media piece, Andrea, I just wanted to know if there are any questions that have come through.
Absolutely. Arlen asked a really fabulous question. He writes, what do you think of Reputation.com, which charges $3,000 to $5,000 to publish positive things, which has the impact of then pushing down some of the unwanted things on the web, such as message boards on finance sites?
So that's a great question. An alum in my year just alerted me to Reputation.com. Honestly, just earlier this week, or within the last week, I felt relatively naive because I hadn't heard of it, but I looked into them, and I think that what they're offering is great, and I certainly wouldn't want to undermine them at all. I do think that in addition to using their service, following some of the simple tips in this outline, right, both about increasing rank and removing unwanted content, can help you achieve similar results, right, or at least get you on the right track. I do think Reputation.com is a very useful tool if you have the disposable income and if you have search results that are hard to remove, right, if you have search results, if you have a high volume of search results that you definitely don't want appearing. But at the same time, I would say that that can be paired with some of the tips from this presentation to achieve an overall very good organic search presence.
Thanks, Aaron. We've got another question come in. Could you go over, just really quickly, where is it that you can alert Google from? So do you go to the Google homepage and have a request? Where do you find that particular piece?
That's a great question. So there are a number of different ways you can get there. You can go to the Even More tab, or you can literally search Google remove unwanted information from Google search. Literally, you can just go to the first few links that show up in organic search, right, and you can click remove content from another site in Google search results, and what you're going to get to, the tool that I just showed you with a screenshot. So I hope that answers the question. Using organic search to get to these tools is great because in case you weren't aware, Google has optimized their own pages such that they show up in Google search so that they get more web traffic and more utility, you know what I mean, and just help build Google's own brand. So my advice would be always use organic search when looking for Google's own tools because they are very, very likely to show up. Okay?
Thank you, Aaron. We have one more question on this particular topic, and then I'm going to hold on to some of the other questions that relate to some things you'll be talking about shortly. A question came in from Hugh. Do you recommend requesting content removal specifically from 3 of the major search engines or just specifically Google?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say if your content is showing up, here we go. If your content is showing up on multiple search engines, especially on the first page, it's very much worth the effort to have it removed from all 3. Whereas Google has, and has had for a long time, a majority of the market share, that does not mean that recruiters, alumni, whoever it may be, that doesn't mean that they are not searching on other search engines. So I would use the top 3 as kind of your guide. You know, use vertical search engines too, right, like YouTube. They're probably less common, but if you have some highly unprofessional content on YouTube, it's worth it to have it removed. Plus Google now, right, owns YouTube, so that would show up in the video results. And it's definitely worth it, right? I think that the benefit you reap greatly outweighs the effort you put in.
And Aaron, what would you, we have a couple questions related to that. Carlos asked, what would you identify as the 3 largest search engines? Obviously, Google, I think, has a more significant market share than the others. But would the others be Bing and Yahoo?
Yeah, so as you see on this page, I would say these 3 have the most market share. I would really concentrate on these. If by some means you happen to identify, right, or discern that there is unwanted content showing up on other search engines, definitely feel free to use whatever tools they have. But my primary advice is just to make sure that your Google search is super, super clean. It's what a lot of smartphones default to. It's what a lot of users default to. And just making sure that that organic search can be as clean and professional as you possibly can get will only benefit you in the end.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. So we are now going to move into social media. So basically, when we talk about social media, we're going to talk about managing profiles first, then conversational guidelines, and what the professionalism standards are around this. So first of all, one, I can't stress this enough. In my personal experience, in everybody else's experience, LinkedIn is so easy for recruiters to use. It literally lets you filter by all the qualifications you're looking for to fill a specific job. It's as if LinkedIn were designed specifically for recruiters. Now, it was really designed for advertisers, but the point is it's very, very simple for them to use. They default to it. As a first line of defense, it's really easy to find people on LinkedIn. If you do not currently have 100% profile completeness, I would recommend that after this webinar wraps up, do whatever LinkedIn tells you to do to get there. It will tell you, right? It will say add a picture, get recommendations, add employers, education, whatever it may be. It takes so little effort compared to the benefits you can reap. If I had to rank, I might even say that having a really good LinkedIn profile is more important than Google or organic search. I'm not ranking, but if I had to, I might say that just because it is so easy for recruiters to use, it's so easy for alumni to use, and you have complete control over it, right? That's one of the things, as I said before, there's a higher level of scrutiny when there's complete agency. Google search, people might be forgiving. They might not, but they might be forgiving. If your LinkedIn profile looks all over the place, or it's a mess, or it's incomplete, there's no forgiveness because that's completely within your control. And to be honest, it's very, very easy to do as well. So when something is so much within your locus of control and then also so easy to accomplish, any recruiter would probably wonder to him or herself, why is this person's LinkedIn not filled out? And what does that reflect or say about him or her? Probably not as much as the recruiter is reading into it, but at the end of the day, the recruiter is the one who decides whether or not you get the interview, whether or not you get the job, or the alum you're trying to network with, and most likely impress. So if you walk away with nothing else, it's that 100% profile completeness on LinkedIn is so easy to achieve and absolutely essential. Moving forward, we'll talk about recommendations and continual updates. So when we talk about recommendations, this is something that, to be honest, you can't control entirely, but the degree of control you have here is probably greater than you might think. And what I mean by that is, one, the way recommendations on LinkedIn is set up, it's very easy to just send somebody a really quick note that goes right to their LinkedIn profile and says, we've worked together either as, client vendor, on the same team, business partner, joint venture, whatever it may be. I'd love to get your recommendation. And honestly, I would be prepared for people who are very senior or very busy to write back to you and say, more than happy to help, can you write it for me? This happens not only on LinkedIn, but this happens in real life, right? Whether you're applying to grad school or for a Fulbright or for whatever it may be, recommenders want to help you, but they don't want to take hours out of their day to write a recommendation. So having bullet points or an outline or anything you can send forward, I would have in your back pocket. Don't send it proactively with the first ask. That's presumptuous, but do send it if prompted. And honestly, they'll appreciate it. If they've asked for it and you have it, that makes their life so much easier. And then all they have to do is copy, paste, make it sound like them, and click submit. You get to read it over, make sure you're comfortable with it, and then you post it to your LinkedIn page. And as arbitrary as it might sound, sometimes recruiters count or read your recommendations. And if you don't have any, you're probably just as good a candidate as the person who has 8, but a recruiter might notice that. And it's well worth it to try to get recommendations, and it's well worth it to try to get them across the different positions you've had. And then when we talk about continual updates, this is really, really critical, especially if you are looking to be recruited out of your current job. But honestly, even if you're not, if you've done something, if you've accomplished something, you've gotten a promotion, whatever it may be, update. If you don't update, people reading it will never know that you accomplished whatever it is you just achieved. How would they? They're not mind readers. Recruiters aren't mind readers. It's really, really important to continually update your profile just so that people know what's going on in your life. And it's kind of as if you, and without updating, it's as if you went through the work of doing something and weren't reaping all the credit. And LinkedIn is extremely public. I'm sure that if a lot of you went on to LinkedIn right now and you saw how many people had looked at your profile in the last week or 5 days or 1 day, you'd be surprised not only, one, at the volume of people who look at your profile, but also who they are. I see all the time people have looked at my profile from industries I didn't even know existed. But they're there and they're seeing my content, and I'm pretty committed to making sure it's the content I want them to see. On Facebook, managing profiles is essential. I'm sure that starting back in, I don't know, 2005, 2006, we heard about employers using Facebook to try to screen employees. They weren't rumors. Well, some of them might have been, but a lot of them weren't rumors. They were true. It's very easy for employers to do this, whether it's a Facebook account of their own or asking someone within the company who went to your school to, or is in some network with you, to look at your profile. It doesn't take a lot of effort, and it certainly can reveal a lot. So at this point, I would like to move to the second poll, which is the Facebook regulation, right, and patrolling poll. And I'll give you a few minutes now to answer the questions.
Okay, and the question has launched. So the question on the board is how employer safe is the content on your Twitter, Facebook, etc. site, with 17% of the vote in. Okay, we'll collect a few more votes. We've got about 80% in. With a few more votes in, I'll close the poll. So you have a last few seconds to choose between the four. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share that information with you. So for the question, it was really arranged. There was a bump of 18%. I don't manage my social media for employee relations. 6% had I take down only the most offensive content. 45% that I patrol regularly, but I'm not 100% confident that it's safe. And 31% as I'm always aware of what's being posted about me online. Those folks must be the regular Googlers.
All right, great. Thanks so much for those results, and thanks everyone for answering the question. I would say that 35% asserting that they always know what's going on is about what I would expect, but it could be much higher. And I will just tell you that I'm sure you won't disagree with this comment. A recruiter could click on your Facebook profile at any time, not just when you're expecting it. So it's really, really important to know what's showing up. Now, I am not recommending, nor do I think anyone would recommend being neurotic, but in general, being active on Facebook is a choice. And along with that choice comes certain benefits as well as certain risks. And I think that most recruiters kind of understand, right, the choice inherent in somebody creating a Facebook profile. And so knowing what's on the profile at all times is, within reason, your responsibility. So it certainly doesn't hurt to have a very good understanding of what's there. Also, if there's content that you want to remove, don't wait. It sounds obvious, but it's so easy to fall into the trap of, well, I'm not applying right now. Or, well, it's not that bad and I'll take it down later. But there's no reason to wait. But there is a reason to act because, as I said, recruiters could be looking at any time. In addition to that, I would just argue that the value created by posting something questionable or offensive or inappropriate or having photos that are questionable or inappropriate, the value created by that does not outweigh the value diminished or lost by having the recruiter see that. And I just want to point out here that I am human, right? So I know how easy it is on any given drunken night or drunken day to post content. It's so easy to do, and it's almost instinctive. It happens almost without thinking. But it's really important to either, one, not post that, or two, go clean up as soon as you realize you made a bad mistake. I mean, sometimes our judgment is impaired, and I'll be the first to admit that. But once that judgment comes back, it's relatively easy and very, very important to go back and kind of clean up, just because, as I said, the web is 24/7. Minus availability issues, the Facebook is always accessible, and you never know when somebody could be looking at your page, especially if you're trying to talk to an alum who may have very well listed Brandeis as a school and is therefore in your network, and if your privacy settings are set up such that people in your network can see a lot more content, it's really worth being careful. Managing profiles. So we talk about what you choose, right? What's within your control. I would say that all four of these have relatively descriptive profile descriptions. Nothing negative. At least it seems to me that all of these are chosen. They're relative and they're public too, right? So I've put these all of these profiles on here because they're public domain, and that's one of the things that I want to stress too. When I was working on the justice, in college, we wondered whether or not we could take someone's profile picture from Facebook and use it as a mug in the story we were running. And although the question had probably not been asked many times before, leaving us without much precedent, the answer from a legal perspective kind of seemed obvious. Facebook is public domain. People choose, right, what to put on Facebook, and as a result, there should be no qualms about having that public information dispersed, used, or looked at freely. And so it's just very important to keep that in mind. This is not your private property. This is not your diary. If you want to have a diary, buy a physical diary with a lock. But Facebook doesn't have a lock. Even privacy settings, which we'll get into in a little bit, don't make the content that's out there not public. And that's really critical. Here on this side, we talk about participating in conversations. All three of the social media channels that I outlined earlier, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, all allow for conversations. It's just important to know what the status of a certain conversation is. So LinkedIn has open groups and closed groups, right? And so open groups can be seen by those conversations can be seen by non-members. Closed groups can only be seen by members. While it might not have a huge impact on what you do or do not post, it's just important to be aware because it might. And those are the kinds of things that you are fully responsible for. Ignorance of what the status of a certain group was or is no excuse. So it's important to take ownership of your identity online. And that's what personal branding is and has always been about. And here, when I talk about professional guidelines, I would just really use the following ethics standards, right? So when you're about to engage in, not assuming any of you are, but if you were about to engage in an unethical behavior at work, you should ask yourself the two questions, which get at the same point, though in varying degrees of severity. One, would you want this posted everywhere at your workplace or your school? This was obviously designed for college students when I first wrote this, tomorrow. And would you want this to appear on the front page of the Wall Street Journal tomorrow, right? So if what you're doing ethically you think is perfectly fine, you should have no problem saying yes to both of these questions. If what you're doing is questionable, as evidenced by a hesitancy or even a negated answer to these questions, don't do it. It's that simple. Why does this apply to social media? Because of what I just said, that every one of these social channels is public and public domain. Just as much as the press is, these are accessible. And there's no excuse, literally no excuse for having content on here that's questionable or inappropriate. And it will do you much, much more harm than good. That I can assure you. We talk about privacy features briefly here. Just wanted to alert you to the fact that Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn all have privacy features. Use them. I won't get into the details or be prescriptive about which privacy features to use and turn on when and where. That's completely a personal decision. But all I have to say is if you don't know what's being posted about you, if you have a lot of friends who very often, I don't know, lose their judgment and tag photos of you, and you don't have a smartphone, for example, maybe, and you're not able to always know what's being posted, the more private you make your account, the less likely it is that a recruiter will at some, unfortunate time click onto your profile and see that photo of you that's been tagged from spring break or from wherever. It's just very, very easy to do. It's a one-time thing. And honestly, there's no real harm. There's no real cost. You can still let your friends see all of your content. Who you're really keeping out is strangers, right, like recruiters, and there's no harm in that. A stranger who sees a private account is far less likely to have a negative reaction than a stranger who sees a public account with wildly questionable or arguably unprofessional content and information. So before we move into web presence, I just want to take a chance to field any more questions that have come in.
Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, there's a bunch of questions. I think some of them were just addressed with what you were talking about. There's a lot of concern. Carlos and Lenny and several other folks talked about how secure really are the Facebook privacy controls. From my perspective as a techie, I think that what someone can see easily, like a recruiter searching something, I think the Facebook privacy controls are helpful. But given the history of Facebook access being hacked on a pretty regular basis, yep. I have to say, if you don't want, I would recommend if you don't want someone to see something, it shouldn't be up on Facebook. Yeah, that's exactly right. So that's a great question. The privacy controls, they do work, right? They do something more than if you were to not enable any privacy controls at all. But, as Andrea just said, if you think you're relying on them and have a lot of inappropriate content on your social media profiles, you're not doing yourself any favors. I would really refer back to this standard on this slide, right? Would you want everyone to know your content? Would you want it to be made public because it's already being made public? And if the answer to that is no for the Wall Street Journal, then there's no reason it should be different for Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. Great, thanks. The other question is, do you recommend changing your Facebook name to make it more difficult for employers to find you on that particular medium? And that's from Carolina. Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. To be honest, I think it depends on your tolerance for risk and how confident you are in the workplace safeness, so to speak, of your profile. I would say if you think that your friends are very likely to post photos of you that are compromising, it doesn't hurt. If they're already friends with you, then I'm sure you know this, changing your name won't change the status of that friendship, right? It's not like they'll have to go find you again. A lot of people, a lot of friends of mine, especially who are females, don't include their last name, not for employer purposes, but because they don't want creepy guys, stalkers, to be able to find them easily. These choices are all personal. I'm not going to be prescriptive about what to do or not to do, but certainly if you have a low tolerance for risk or you think that there's a high probability of inappropriate content being posted on your Facebook without you knowing about it, then changing your name is certainly one option. Great. And we have another thing about how much you include or how not. So we've got a couple questions on that. Julia proposes, that she's active on LinkedIn but doesn't really want Facebook or Twitter account and is at a negative. And a similar question that was posted by Sharon talks about, do you think, is it negative if you have a thin Facebook profile? So the how much and which platforms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll answer the second one first. Is it negative to have a thin Facebook profile? Absolutely not. If all the information that you have on there are things you feel comfortable with employers knowing, then by all means, keep it as thin as you want. In fact, a lot of, how can I say this politely, Facebook users of the older generation have just intrinsically very thin profiles that don't reveal a lot of information, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. To answer the first question, is it okay not to have Facebook and Twitter? I would say 90% of the time, that wouldn't be a negative. I would just say your credibility is probably compromised or comes into question if you are applying for jobs that deal with the social media sector specifically. And so I work at an ad agency. I work at Ogilvy, and it's probably pretty much expected that I have a good understanding of how Facebook and Twitter work. If I didn't have my own profile, but I knew the functionality very well, I could probably make the case, but I'm a marketing strategist. If I were a digital strategist, or if I worked in social at Ogilvy, formerly known as digital influence, I would say that the leeway is probably much less. So it really depends on what it is you're trying to do. I would say that most of the time there's no harm in opting out of those channels. It just really depends on the types of jobs that you're looking for.
All right, thank you.
Right.
There was one question. Julia keeps posting around in academia. I'm going to actually argue with her as an academic. Julia posts one thing. In academia, it might actually be an advantage not to be on these platforms. And I would argue maybe, but not necessarily on LinkedIn. She also writes, academics seem not to be active even on LinkedIn. I think it depends on what area of academia you work in. I think it depends on specialty and field. I know certainly for academic administration, folks are online, and certain fields within higher ed are online as well. So I just want to share that good humor that Julia is sharing with us about the quirks of academia.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate that. And I think that it will be very interesting to kind of track that behavior over the next few years. I certainly agree with you that we see the highest usage of LinkedIn come from communications, financial services, management consulting. We see it a lot in, just fields like that. I think that we see it to a lesser extent, certainly in the academy and with scholars. But I do wonder, they have to go through recruitment too. And I do wonder if it will become an efficiency tool that's picked up by universities and other academic institutions in the future. I don't have a prediction on that, but I do think it will certainly be something worth tracking. But thank you for all the input. We have 10 minutes left, so I'm going to try to power through these next two sections and pause for questions at the end. So when it comes to web presence, right, and website creation, you want to ask yourself two questions before you decide to make a website. One is, do you have a portfolio? Two, are you looking for a job? If you don't have a portfolio, don't make a website. No offense, but there's probably not a lot of content worth posting. And two, if you're not looking for a job and you create a website that looks like you're looking for a job and your current employer finds it, that can look suspicious. So given that, let's say you assume, right, or you answer yes to those questions, you decide to make a website for yourself. I would say the steps there are go get a domain, right, from GoDaddy.com. You can either get one that's cheaper with advertising or more expensive without. Hire a designer. Maybe you yourself are a designer, right, are a coder. If you're not, go get someone. It's worth it. And create an information architecture and content strategy that's thoughtful, right, that's logical and that's unique. You want the navigation of your page to be very, very intuitive to your end user. If it's a recruiter who goes on your page and gets frustrated and confused, that's just going to hurt your brand equity that you've built up with that recruiter so far. One, I recommend always having an introduction page, something that introduces who you are, what you're looking for, what your story is, and then also divide your portfolio into sections. So if you're a journalist, right, you might say, here are the news pieces I've published, here are the news analysis pieces I've published, here are the feature pieces I've published, right? Or if you are a graphic designer, right, you might want to say here is traditional versus here's interactive, right? Here is print versus here is out of home. Whatever you can do to divide up your portfolio, you know, the better. It just makes it, again, more structured, more navigable. When it comes to blog creation, you have to ask yourself if you have a specific topic you'd like to cover, if you have something salient, relevant, and original to contribute. And I don't mean to criticize anyone, but you have to think really hard and deep about this question. And, you know, I'm sure all of you are intelligent. I wouldn't doubt that for a second. But do you have something that is original to add to the existing conversation around this topic that merits your own web property? The answer may be yes, but I'd certainly think about it. And then do you have the time, right, the discipline, the willingness to update regularly? That's really important, because going on a blog and seeing that the last post is from 2005, I think either one doesn't do anything positive for your personal brand and may even turn some users off. So if it were the case that you answered yes to all those questions, I would say, again, first step, get a domain, right? I mean, there are so many great services out there. Hire a designer, right? Make it look unique, make it look on brand for you, and start posting. Have a blog roll. Get other people interested in your blog. The more visibility you have, right, especially if it's something you want employers to see, the better. And of course, blogs help with organic search as well. Oh, so sorry, I got ahead of myself. Blog roll is one of the methods that could be employed to garner visibility, as well as linking strategies. So just link to it from other properties, link from it to other properties. It helps. All right, and our last category here is email. So I just want to talk about email guidelines, especially as we move across platforms. 1, pay attention to your identity. This is really, really, really important. 1, your signature, right? What does it say? What are all the details underneath your name? Does it say where you went to school, right? Does it say your current position? Be thoughtful and purposeful about that. Include a mobile signature. If you are signing, or if you're writing an email from a tablet or a smartphone, while you shouldn't have any mistakes in the email at all, and that's the second bucket here, having a mobile signature helps explain to somebody who's on the receiving end why your email was so brief, right? Or why, if there is a typo, right, why that happened. Having a mobile signature just alerts the reader to a different kind of state of mind that you were probably in when writing the email. You want it to be polite. You want to make sure you wrote back. They appreciate that. Just let them know that it was from a mobile device. And then photos as well. So I know Andrea told me that there have been some problems reaching out with a Gmail address, or I think even maybe the Brandeis mail allows for photos. Make sure it's professional. Make sure that it's not from spring break, or if it is, that it's fully clothed. And just be sure that you know who's on the receiving end of your emails too. If you're sending to an alum who's also using a Gmail address, Gmail users can see Gmail users' photos. So it's just easier. It takes very little effort, and there's a lot of value in changing your photo if you need to. Bucket number 2, proofread for mechanics. This is super critical. You lose credibility instantaneously by having any kind of mechanical errors. Even if you are really smart and thoughtful and diligent, it doesn't come across that way, especially to a recruiter. Pay attention to your subject line. Keep it brief. Keep it actionable. If you're applying for a specific job, put your name, put the position and the office. I always say just make it as informative as you can. Send an email thank you note the day of. So if you have an interview, this is really what I mean. If you have an interview, if you have a conversation with someone, send an email the day of. You always have the option of sending a postal mail as well. That will get to them a few days later, depending on geography. But sending an email just lets them know that you know manners, that you know what's going on. You're like aware of your personal brand, how you come across to others. It's really easy to do. It takes 5 seconds. sign with your Google name. So even if you say like sincerely, comma, Aaron in the signature, have your Google name, have the name you want them to look up. Having them see that will be a prompt almost to have them Google you, which if you've taken some of the steps previously in this presentation will help. And then ultimately, be specific and concise. If you're asking for something, make the ask explicit. If you're telling something, again, just be concise. Don't waste people's time. If you write something that's long-winded, even if you didn't mean to waste someone's time, they're going to think, this person's wasting my time. And that's the last impression you want to give off, especially if it's unintended. I mean, frankly, I don't think you want to give off that impression if it is intended, but you probably don't intend that, and you probably want people to think that you're being respectful. And the best way to be respectful is to just keep brevity and pithiness top of mind when you're constructing emails to people you want to talk with. And for other information, we have 2 links here. One of them is the Hyatt Career Center social media hub, right? That's at the top. And then also Hyatt has some how-to guidelines for online branding as well. That's the URL at the bottom. As well, all of these in the white boxes show the different tools that are available from Hyatt. I personally have used BeHired very recently, and it's great for alumni. And I think it's an excellent resource. You paid probably a lot in tuition, and there's no reason not to take advantage of some of the alumni services that the Hyatt Career Center is offering post-graduation. So that wraps up the presentation. We have 2 minutes left to take any questions from the last 2 sections or from the presentation overall.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I have a quick point of clarification that an alum rightfully pointed out about the sense you had used the term public domain, and it was just a quick legal clarification. Many of the things that you use it in the context of talking about content on Facebook, and she just wanted to clarify, so thank you to Lisa for doing this, clarifying the difference between public domain, which property right-wise, if something is on Facebook, if you've read your policy guidelines carefully, actually Facebook owns it. So you're in some ways giving up your property rights in your agreement to use Facebook, because then they own that particular content. So they still have rights over that ownership. I think what you were intending to say, it was really in the, not in the public domain in the legal ownership sense, but that it's in the public view, that it certainly is. If you put it on Facebook, you have to be prepared for someone to be able to see it in the world of the web, that they could actually see that information. So that was just a quick
that's absolutely right. Thank you very much for clarifying that. And I didn't mean at all, of course, to be misleading. But yeah, exactly. It meant 2 things. One is that, as you so rightfully pointed out, it's not your property anymore, right? You don't have ownership rights over that. Facebook does. And then as well, it is in the public view and should be expected to be used as such. So any claim to, well, that person shouldn't have had access to that because it was my property or it was my content, is actually invalid, because, right, both is the legality and also just the nature of Facebook being a public-facing channel as well.
All right, thanks so much. And there's a couple questions. A lot of them are about sort of on the tip side. So one of them is, there's 2 that are related. What should you include into a website, and what is most effective to include on a website? And also, what kind of content similar to that is good to put on a blog? And can a personal blog be helpful for business reputation? So 2 mediums, one a more static website, one a blog, but both of them asking the question of sort of what content would be the strongest.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So the first one is around what you should include in a website. I mean, my personal opinion is the only time it makes sense to create a website is if you have a portfolio. If you have a bunch of work that you want to show off in an easy-to-access way, employers can just kind of log on, browse through your easily navigable website, and kind of look at the work you've done. That's when it makes sense to invest the time and resources in creating a website. Other than that, if the only things you would post on your website are basically a recap of your resume, save the time and save the money, honestly. Your resume is easily transmitted as a PDF, so I'd say keep it that way. And then the second question is about blogs. Can a personal blog help you? Absolutely. Again, thinking about, just the space that I operate in, right, in terms of marketing, if you wanted to be, for example, a brand planner at an agency, and you had a lot of thoughts on current cultural trends, right, or kind of demographic research, or what's interesting now, or what society is paying attention to, by all means, that's the kind of thinking that brand planners really love. They want those curious, inquisitive minds, people who are always wanting to know what trends are, right, what is going on in various industries, various verticals, and with the general population as a whole. So I definitely think it can be beneficial. And the content that you put on the blog is really up to you. I would just think about it, again, from a field perspective. If you know what field you want to go into or what field you are in, make sure that there's some kind of tie back from your blog content to your professional life. And the example that I gave with brand planners, I think is a relevant one.
Thank you. The other question, and you've got Alicia just said thank you, that she's loved your presentation. It sounds like she's on her way out, but we have a couple other questions. Another one is, do you have a recommendation for content management systems? I responded to Carol when she asked that and said, has she used Hootsuite? Because that's very popular in the sort of academia nonprofit because it's so inexpensive. But do you have any recommendations for tools that are kind of more broader content management systems?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to say that in terms of social media management dashboards, if you are using multiple channels at once, then certainly using Hootsuite or TweetDeck can be very beneficial. I wouldn't necessarily call those content management. I mean, of course, every piece of social media, every tweet, right, or whatnot is content in and of itself. I would just really call those like social media aggregators or dashboards. In terms of using content management system for your portfolio, on the other hand, I think it's really up to you and your designer or whoever's coding the site to kind of think about what the best way is to organize. So while I think that using them in general is beneficial, I don't want to be prescriptive about which brands, right, or which services are more useful than others, because it's all very situation dependent.
Okay. And another question that is related about giving personal information out, and you had talked about that in the context of some of the social media tools, but this is specific to cell phones. Okay. Emily writes, you seem to be very willing to give your cell to anyone. Have you had problems giving out your cell phone freely?
Yeah, I haven't, to be honest. I think that actually it was really good that I had my cell phone information, and of course this is personal preference. But for me, I enjoyed having my cell phone information when a recruiter contacted me recently with a job that I was interested in learning more about. I was able to take my cell phone and remove myself from the very open environment in which we work here at Ogilvy and go have a conversation around the job prospect. So I thought it was great. It allowed for human interaction right away. But again, it's personal preference. But to answer the question, no, I haven't experienced any problems.
Okay. And what I think might be the last question, I don't know if Evan's getting the last word unless someone sneaks under the wire here. He asked if you had an opinion on Repeller as a social media reputation management tool.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same answer to what I gave about Reputation.com, is that these are all very, very, very useful, especially if you have a lot of content that you're trying to manage, a lot of unwanted content that you're trying to kind of control or reduce. I do think that the average candidate, let's just call them the average professional, can be successful without employing these services, but I by no means want to diminish the value that they add. I certainly think they can be extremely useful. And to be quite honest as well, I'm not as familiar. Like, this is my specialty because of my personal experience and my experience helping others reshape their online brands. But by no means is this what I do for a living, right, all the time. I have had some one-off engagements, and by no means am I familiar with the variety of services that exist out there. So I do say generally, if you're a particularly what I call quote-unquote high-risk candidate, then feel free to go out and use those other services. But I do think that with, you know, kind of careful monitoring and common sense, the average candidate can be very successful managing his or her online brand.
All right, and we had one more question sneak under the wire that I don't know if you want to answer or not. Ada asks what your Facebook page is, because clearly she couldn't find it on a quick Google search.
My Facebook page? Well, right, it's because I've set the privacy settings.
There we go.
Such that it's not identifiable by people outside my network. This helps just in case, right, as I was saying before, the emergency, right, somebody posts something that I'm not aware of. And so I think that, you know, that's something that can be done by everyone. Everyone has the option to go in and change that privacy setting. If the question is what's my specific URL, I think
you don't have to feel obligated to answer that question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like if you have mutual friends with me, I think the setting is such that you should be able to find me. And if you don't, then I will find you.
All right. All right, that is all the questions I have.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Hyatt Career Center, for hosting this webinar.
And thank you very much. And, of course, thank you to the attendees who are now filing off. What we'll do is we have a list of all the folks in attendance, and we will follow up in the next few days with an evaluation of the webinar so we can get people's feedback on both content, what kind of webinars you're interested in the future, and any specific feedback on this particular presentation. So you know, Aaron, we've got a lot of thank yous coming in. So Jessica and Hugh, and there's a whole bunch of folks, and I will pass those on to you. For anyone else that sends those in, I will pass those on to you in writing via email, because there's lots of people writing thanks to you.
All right, wonderful. Well, great to spend the time.
All right, thanks so much, and may everyone have a wonderful night and a good week.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.